on the thing's not being cooperative. I'll be right back. Hold on.
Okay. So, Stacy, you've been busy. Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen, whatever time you're tuning in the program. We normally do What's Going on FlintTalkRadio.com. We're doing a special program this afternoon. We're coming to you on Wednesday. It's about 2:10 in the afternoon here, and I'm sure those of you who are not watching it live, you are picking it up on FlintTalkRadio.com, the number one podcast program in the city of Flint, and working very hard to become the number one program throughout the United States. We have a special program this afternoon that we're very excited about, and that is a program that's going to be sponsored here in Flint by the Frederick Douglass Society, and we have with us the founding president, I guess you have to say CEO also.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Stacy Swimp, who is here to talk with us about a program that this organization is putting on right here in the city of Flint, and outlying areas can also participate in this program. I want to welcome you, first of all, to the program, Stacy, and I want you to tell us about, first of all, your organization, and then we'll get into the program you're going to be sponsoring on the 20th of June.
Well, thank you. I'm privileged and honored to be here. And first of all, the Frederick Douglass Society is a national public policy institution that emphasizes freedom in labor and education. Freedom in general, but we really emphasize labor policies. We call it labor freedom and educational freedom. And what that means essentially from a policy perspective is we advocate such things as the repeal of the Davis-Bacon Act. A lot of people don't know that we have Jim Crow laws still in America today that specifically were intended to marginalize black workers in the construction industry. The Davis-Bacon Act was passed in 1931 because black southern construction workers were going up to the northern states and underbidding white-only unions at that time. And we were working with our hands, as Booker T. Washington said. We understood that labor was key to our economic independence. And so they passed these laws to keep us from competing in construction. 82 years later, the Davis-Bacon Act is not only still in effect in our country, but it's still having the same harsh consequences for black workers in trade skills in construction industry. So we are really working hard to see policies like that repealed. The Davis-Bacon Act, we believe in educational choice. We believe that every American parent should have the dignity to determine where you educate your kids and why you put your child in a particular school. So these are some, and we believe that at the end of the day that we need to do what we can to develop and cultivate economic independence through business creation, entrepreneurialism in a local area. But we've heard all that before. That's not new rhetoric to the black community. But the problem is we really haven't seen a follow through. And I think that very often also what's happening is that we too often are trusting the wrong entities or the wrong persons who very often are perpetuating a fraud that they're working for us, but really they're working for themselves. And so we see this in every inner city, and it doesn't have any particular labels to it at all times. But at the end of the day, we need to have Dr. King said it, we need a revolution of values. And we have to have a serious conversation about the policies that we've been supporting all of these years. Something is wrong when we have area code 48507 that's blighted and in economic deprivation, and 5 minutes away is economically thriving in Grand Blanc. So that means that we need to take a serious look at our policies here locally. And so we will have a good time, and we will take a look at the Juneteenth event, celebration, should I say. We know that this was a celebration of American freedom, particularly freedom for Black Americans, which was brought about by the 13th Amendment. And so we'll look at that and we'll have fun and we'll reflect, but we'll also learn the valuable lessons of history so that we can take a serious look at who have we been, what have we been, where have we been, so that we can understand who we are, what we are, where we are, moreover, so we can understand where we still need to go, what we still need to do, and who we still need to become.
Okay, now before we get to the program on June the 20th, let me just back up a little bit and talk a little bit about your organization. It's named the Frederick Douglass Society. You mentioned Booker T. Washington's name, and you're right about the grounding point of his philosophy. Work with your hands and be independent by the things that you have, the skills that you have. You named it Frederick Douglass Society. Is that was that set up to do this work, or it was set up for some other reason, then this is the work you're doing right now?
No, that's a great question. The Frederick Douglass Society was intended to do several things. One, we have to have policy advocacy. That's one thing. What do I mean by that? So we can give our young people all the training in the world, but if you've got public policies that are in place to set an obstacle up in front of them, to prevent them from being able to capitalize on the training that you give them, then you still have nothing. You still have a problem. So you have to have that policy advocacy side. You have to have someone that will fight injustice from a policy perspective, much like what was going on during the Civil Rights era. You had Thurgood Marshall and the lawyers of the NAACP were in the courtrooms fighting. But then you had the impact side, the direct impact side, the educational side. And that's what Dr. King and many others were doing. They were advocating, but they were also in the community dealing with people on the grassroots level. So we were also intending to do things like the Juneteenth celebration, workshops, seminars, educational campaigns, so where we can teach financial literacy, constitutional literacy, so that we can teach people about the role of government so they can understand how they're being affected on a local, state, and federal level. These are some of the same things that Dr. King did, some of the same things the NAACP used to do, some of the same things the urban leagues used to do when we were fighting Jim Crow. And I'm not trying to be facetious, but it's certainly intentional when I say they used to do it. and so they still do some good things. But we need to make sure that we do what Jesus said. We need to return to our first works, our first love, and continue to get back to the grassroots things that we need to do to make sure our communities can lift ourselves up. You know, we've heard that saying, lift yourself up by the bootstraps, but brother, we don't have the straps. So what we got to do is we have to develop and cultivate the straps. And the straps are, the straps are up to us to develop and cultivate. It's not up to the government. It's not up to someone else. It's up to us to make sure that we take these straps that are flapping on the side. We do have them. It's just that we don't use them. And our dollar circulates one time in our community and it leaves. So that's what I mean when I say financial literacy. That means that we have to educate ourselves about the economic decisions that we are making that are harming us. In the black community, we are the #1 consumer of whiskey. We're spending more money collectively as a people on whiskey than we are real estate and bonds. So that's a problem. And so we've got to talk about how do we turn that around? What have we done and what are we doing well? We are doing some things well. We don't want to just have this negative, harsh perspective where we're just condemning everybody, because, you have some good people in this community and you got some people that are volunteering, who are working hard. You have some people that are, they just need more help, sometimes need more understanding of different resources. So we have to praise where the praise is merited, and then we have to critique where the critique is merited, and then we have to bring it all together and make a quality decision that those things that unite us are more important than those things that divide us. And the reason I say that, and I'll get off my little rant, is because unfortunately there's another phenomenon in our communities, and that is the lack of diversity of ideas. So very often, if we're not coming from a specific ideology politically, sometimes our people will shut down and we won't listen. If we assume that person is Republican, we won't listen. If we assume that person is for a particular candidate or against a particular candidate, we won't listen. We sometimes make the mistake of thinking that all of our gold is coming from one pot. And unfortunately, the pot that we think our gold is coming from is only giving us silver, brother. I
see. Well, you're not ranting at all. You're making some very good point. When you say that the Bacon-Davis bill in 1931,
the Davis-Bacon, yes,
was and is still an impediment. That goes against the grain of some of the popular sentiment out there, and that is that the government is looked at in our community too often as the solution solver rather than the problem that we have to deal with. Too much government, and it seems like we're kind of going down that pathway. So you're saying that the Davis-Bacon bill is an impediment to inner city development and things of that sort.
Well,
and other development.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that you're right that many times today we are a little misled in terms of the role of government and the role government should or should not play in our community. But if we go back to our history and we listen to our forefathers, listen to what Frederick Douglass said after the Civil War and the emancipation of Black Americans, and after essentially the Juneteenth celebration first kicked off in 1865, the political leaders of that day asked Frederick Douglass, well, Mr. Douglass, what are we going to do with the Negro? What does that mean exactly? What were they asking him? Well, they were saying, well, you have millions of Black Americans that will suddenly be free. And they were looking at the fact that the majority of them were illiterate. And they were blind to the fact that these people had serious work skills and work ethic and trade skills, because we were building everything at that time. But yet some of them would still say, well, how are they going to make it? They don't have skills, they don't have education. We had plenty of skills. But Frederick Douglass responded to the political leaders of that time by saying, he wrote a speech. And for those of you who are viewing, who are listening, you can look this up. The speech is called, what does the Negro want? This was Frederick Douglass' response to the question. Douglass said, do nothing with the Negro. In other words, he said that he wanted government to leave us alone. Leave us alone is what he said. Basically, Frederick Douglass was saying that when you try to help us, we're worse off after the fact than what we were before you tried to help us. So leave us alone and let us develop and cultivate our own resources.
Right.
And let us struggle. You know, we're gonna struggle. We're gonna fall sometimes, and we're gonna have our peaks and valleys. But we trust God. Let us compete in a free market society. We'll be just fine. That's very similar to what Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was the founder of what we now call Black History Month, and at that time, 1926, we called it the Negro History Week. Now, Woodson was a scholar; he was an educator, and by all means, he was a very strong political advocate at his time. Woodson said something in his book called The Miseducation of the Negro, which I think should be a required reading today for any educator, for anyone who wants to really understand the socioeconomic and the moral conditions of the Black community. That should be a required reading. And in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, Woodson said something very profound. He said that when we go to the government seeking that government should solve our problems, he said, we have just conceded that we as men are utter failures. So this was the attitude of Black leaders at that time. We didn't want government doing anything for us. We wanted them to leave us alone, which made sense because government, were the ones perpetuating Jim Crow laws and black codes,
Exactly.
and why did we want government helping us? We wanted government to get off of our backs,
Right?
And so, and contrary to what anybody thinks, the government didn't free us. We agitated,
Yes.
we resisted, and we won, and we fought for freedom. And so, government has never given us anything. And so today, when government does give us something, you better believe it's because they're actually trying to take something away from us in a subtle way. So we believe that the key to economic independence and the key to the restoration of family and our moral, spiritual, social dignity is to be independent and really to be interdependent on one another. That was the Christian model in the book of Acts. They sold all that they had and they distributed things according to their needs. Notice though, it said that they did it. The government didn't do it.
Right.
They did it.
We went into the 1960s with that sentiment, and I certainly saw it in my own community. I'm from Birmingham, and I saw that throughout my community. And we went in with that sentiment in the 1960s. We came out with a very different sentiment after the 60s were over. And that is what is really beginning to create these problems we're seeing so pervasive in our community right now. Let me talk a little bit about the program that you set up. It's called The Race to Economic Emancipation. And so is this the second part of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863?
Well, that's a great question. Well, think about it. In 1863, well, first of all, we're in the 150th year of the Emancipation Proclamation, 150th anniversary. And a lot of people don't know that the Emancipation Proclamation was never intended to free the slaves, okay? But nevertheless, it was not a bill. It was a series of what we call executive orders that went into effect in January of 1863. But it wasn't until 2.5 years later, 1865, June 19th, where General Granger of the Union Army went down to Texas and declared the war was over. And this was after the passing of the 13th Amendment, which freed over 150,000 slaves in Texas. And since that time, Black Americans started celebrating what many call the Black July 4th, if you will. But I call it an American Freedom celebration. The reason I say that is because even though the benefactors of that were Black Americans, people of African descent, certainly we couldn't have done that by ourselves. So you have white Quakers and white Protestant and white Christians and abolitionists who also helped to fight for our freedom. And so we can't forget that and be ungrateful for that. And so I don't like the idea of celebrating as if it's just a black thing.
Right.
I like to say this is an American freedom
sure.
thing. And so the reason I use the term race to economic emancipation is because we are in a state of economic deprivation today. And I thought about Hebrews. And I always go back to the scripture because I'm a Christian first. And the Frederick Douglass Society is a true Christian organization. And we believe in the biblical principles as a cornerstone of what we're doing. And so in the Bible, it says that in Hebrews, it says, let us run the race. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, it says, and since we have so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run this race to the finish, and let us lay aside all those things which so easily besets us. And in a nutshell, what the writer was saying was, look, we've had a lot of historical examples of people who've overcome anything that was in their path. And they were running a race to win it. They were in it to win it. But they understood in order to win it, they had to lay aside anything that prevented them from being successful. Any excuses, fear, in our cases, sometimes we have a tendency to try to pull each other down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we call that the crab mentality. So there are a number of issues out there that could beset us, if you will. And so when I thought about Hebrews, I thought, this is what we need to do. We as a people, first as an American people, but primarily since we're in the inner city, here we need to run this race to economic prosperity and independence. So I wanted to look at what the scripture says, look at what Frederick Douglass said, look at our history, and just kind of tie it all in and say, well, let's run this race to economic emancipation. But understand something, folks. Without a strong, stable family, economic stability is very difficult. And without social stability, economic stability on a national level is impossible. So we will be dealing with economic policies locally, statewide, and on a national level so that we can have an educational conversation. But we will also deal with some of those moral, spiritual issues, in a different kind of way, I think, than what we tend to discuss it, so that we can understand the foundation we have to have in place if the solid the free market economic solutions, if they're going to work, then we still have to be stable as a social on a social level, and particularly in the family. So
it's amazing. It's amazing, Stacy, that is not put in as part of the solution when all of the indicators are that when you have the two-parent household, the economic gap between whites and blacks in this country is literally closed, and 94% of the income of black families and is that of 100% of the income of white families. And so that gap is really indistinguished from one community to another once you have the family that is intact. And it's never even mentioned as far as what is the solution to the problem. We always talk about civil rights kinds of things, which are important issues, but the family has to be a key to that conversation. You're bringing in some really heavyweights here into the city. These are people that I don't think Flint has ever seen this coalition that you're putting together. Can you tell us some of the people? I see Reverend C.L. Bryant is one of the person you're bringing in, and another one of my favorite persons, Brian is certainly one of them, and then you're bringing in Star Parker. It doesn't get any better than that. So tell us about some of the people you're bringing in, and then how did you get, we don't see this kind of array of talent coming in on that level to Flint as often as we like to see it, and this is something that's really primary here. How did you get C.L. Bryant, who made this tremendous film,
Runaway Slave,
and Star Parker, who is constantly on national TV with her programs and things of that sort? How did you get those persons to come in, and you're given, and the event you're having is free on June 20th?
I begged. I'm just joking.
It's a tremendous thing that you've done here. So, tell us about the way you put this program together.
Reverend C.L. Bryant, ladies and gentlemen, is a phenomenal leader in our country. He's the founder of One Nation Back to God, which is a ministry that he has, and he's also the creator of a award-winning film, the Crystal Dove Award, which is the Christian version of the Academy Awards. And Reverend C.L. Bryant is also a mentor to me, and so he's someone that I've had a great relationship with. I've learned a lot from him. I've been privileged to be in a number of spaces with him, and I've been talking to him, and he shares the same views that I have in terms of how important it is to get this message of economic independence and liberty in places where sometimes we don't get the opportunity to hear these perspectives. And so he's honored to come here and to build relationships. And hopefully this is not the end, but the beginning of something, not just a one-time thing. I've also been in a number of spaces with Ms. Star Parker, who is also the founder and leader of an organization called Urban Cure. Star has been very active and very prominent in helping to fight against social policies that have really led to the breakdown of our families. She has been, and by all accounts, a civil rights activist in every true meaning of the word. And I just came back from Washington, D.C. because she's been fighting to make sure that unborn children have a voice. And so she has agreed to come here and to share her message. We also have K. Carl Smith, who is the founder of the Frederick Douglass Liberty Message. And K. Carl Smith will be coming and talking about Frederick Douglass and liberty principles. And so we have a number of people that will be coming in. And so we will have a dialogue about a number of major issues. But, the people have also heard a lot of talk for a long time. And so someone watching or listening, they're like, hey, we've heard all the talk. We need real solutions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a valid attitude to have. And so I want your listening audience to know that each and every one of the speakers that we're bringing are deeply invested with solutions. Mm-hmm. They're deeply invested with solutions in economics. They're deeply invested with solutions in social policies. We're deeply invested in issues in the labor area. As I talked about the Davis-Bacon Act. So that those who attend, you won't just be hearing speeches, but you'll be hearing a deep analysis of problems, but you will also be introduced to some very unique solutions that we believe can work to help this city recover.
Okay. Now, we know it's going to be on June the 20th. Where is it going to be held?
It is going to be held at the Riverfront Banquet Center indoors. I know that Flint has had a number of Juneteenth celebrations at the Riverfront, I think outside. Mm-hmm. So I just want to emphasize that this will be indoors at what's called it's actually where the Radisson used to be in downtown Flint. But now it's called the Riverfront Banquet Center, and indoors. And it will be free of charge from 7 to 9 p.m. On Thursday, June 20th. And you can go online at www.frederickdouglassociety.org. I would love for you to pre-register if you can, so we can have some idea of how many people we're coming to prepare for the number of programs that we might need for those who are in attendance. And come on down and have a good time and meet some new faces and understand where we can go to some new places.
Now, how would they pre-register for the event? You
would go online. For those of you who are able to access the internet, you would go right online to our organization's homepage, and you'll see right there where it says that register here for the June 2020 event, and they would just use their email, and they would just register their name and email so that we can understand who's coming. But if you don't have an email, and if you don't register online and you just show up, it's okay. You will still be welcomed with open arms.
Yes, one of the things I did in coming to the studio, when you and I met last time, I was wearing a shirt and tie and a suit, and I said I'm going to come here more informal so you won't think out there in the listening audience that you have to wear a tuxedo to the event. I think you do the requirement to pull their pants up, but I don't think you have a dress code. But
no, it's come as you are, and I mean, obviously, if young men are walking around with their pants down, I mean, we may someone may comment to them, hey, but for the most part, it's come as you are.
Okay.
And I give our young men credit. I think that though some of them may walk around with their pants down in the community, I trust that most of our young men have enough conscience, if you will, in that kind of environment to pull them up. So I've not run into a situation yet in that environment where a young man does that. So I think our young men are still redeemable. And what I learned is that it's a cultural thing, and we've got to fix it, but it's a cultural thing. But many of these young men who have their pants hanging down are still decent young men. So some of these young men are in college. These young men are working, and so we have to be careful not to make judgments about what they're doing and what they're not doing based upon that. We just got to encourage them to stop doing it.
I agree with you on that. I think that this program is going to have a catalytic effect upon us here in the city of Flint. I don't think we've ever had anything quite like this program here that you're putting on. And when you say that you're bringing in C.L. Bryant and Star Parker, that is a major event just in those two persons that you have on the program, and then you bring another person in addition to that. Now, the program is going to be June the 20th, and that's going to be at the Riverfront Banquet Center. It's free of charge to the public, and you're coming here to hear about how we can get Flint off the ground. We want all the persons out there to not only come yourselves, but also to talk to your neighbors about it. Not everybody will be privy to this conversation, and want you to help us get the word out, because we're looking for a very large turnout downtown and want to make sure that we have the people that's in the movers and shakers, first of all, but all the people are invited to come down and be a part of this wonderful program called Race to Economic Emancipation. Stacy, you have been in the city of Flint how long? And you've been a standard bearer here in the city. Now, what is your background in terms of your coming into Flint? I know you were not born here.
No, I was actually raised in Charleston, South Carolina, where we call it the Low Country. And the Low Country, and I grew up down there eating watermelon and crabs. And so I came to Flint, Michigan in 1991 the first time, and came here as a young, hard-headed guy, you know. And I like to tell people I was a thug. I know today I don't quite sound like it or look like it, and you know, whatever that may sound or look like, but I certainly was a young man that had no sense of personal responsibility at that time. Mm-hmm. So that was way back in 1991, and I've been in Michigan ever since, but I came back to Flint approximately 2.5, 3 years ago. And so, you know, I've been involved with a lot of national policy advocacy and grassroots activism, and but I believe that it's time now to focus in on the city that I live in. Mm-hmm. And I'm absolutely and resolutely committed to doing everything I can to serve it, volunteer here, to play here, bring resources here, and to do what I can to make this city a better place to live, work, and play by working with others who are also as invested. And again, I said earlier, you know, there are people who are already here doing wonderful things and been doing good things. Is we just got to figure out a way to bring it all together.
I see. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I think that this is going to be one of those programs that plant a seed in the community, and I think it's going to have a wonderful effect upon how we do our business here from this point forward. That's going to be June the 20th of this year, and it's going to be at the Riverfront Banquet Center that's right downtown. You know, the programs we normally have down there or outside. I think they do have a program on the 19th on the outside. This is going to be on the inside. All of you are invited to be involved in it, and we want to, in fact, have you there as our guests in this program. And it's featuring some really heavyweights here. C.L. Bryant doesn't come into Flint. I don't think he's ever been here to the city of Flint.
No, sir.
And this is going to be a first. And, you know, I have to tell you, I saw his film, Runaway Slave, and that film was very moving.
Yeah, and just for your listening audience, when you hear a term like that, don't let it be off-putting to you. It just simply means that we're running away from those things that are holding us back. And they're keeping us in bondage economically and otherwise.
Yes. Okay, well, I want you to put that on your calendar. That's June the 20th. The program starts, I'm sure you're saying 7 o'clock sharp, so this is not going to be the CP time. Come in. And
yeah. You know, let's say 6:30.
6:30. Be in your seats at 6:30. From 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the evening. And that day of the week is, what is that?
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday. I want you to be there for this program. It's going to really be quite an event. When you have C.L. Bryant and Star Park on the same program, I don't see how you can have anything but an exciting event. Just those two persons alone. You bring another person in addition to that. So put that on your calendar right now. Don't forget, tell your friends about it, and we'll see you there at the Riverbank Center on June the 20th. Be in your seats at 6:30. We're going to start exactly 7 o'clock, and it's from 7 o'clock to 9.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for coming in, and I have really enjoyed the conversation. I know the audience has also enjoyed the conversation. With that in mind, we'll all see you on the 20th of June, and don't forget, bring your friends with you.
Thank you.